I'm co-hosting Fabrice Bernard, but I don't know if we can see him. Hello, Fabrice.
Hello, everyone.
Nice to see you. You are the co-founder and CTO of Theodo, which is now a premium tech player addressing all markets of the digital transformation. Your group has now grown to 400 people in 8 companies located in Europe, United States, and Africa. And when you met Antoine Cotin in 2011, a lean coach of Operae, who introduced you to the lean learning system, you found a grail you were looking for, and it is a story you will share with us today.
Yes, thank you very much, Marie-Pierre, for this introduction, and welcome everyone to this case study on what does TPS look like in a digital environment. And I guess to start with, the question is, why am I here in the first place? And this dates back to 2005. At the time, I was just finishing my studies, and I got an internship at a Japanese software consultancy, and these were my expectations, a really cool environment where I would thrive and learn and create value, and this is what I got. And I think this experience was really foundational, because it really made me realize I would never thrive in a bureaucratic environment where I would be subject to very hierarchical structures and very rigid processes and an ability to innovate because of fear of change. And therefore, when I finished my studies, I didn't have that many options. And so the option I chose was to actually launch my own company with Benoit. So this is me and Benoit at the time. And the first company we actually launched, and this company would be a company which I would have liked to apply myself. And of course, in the industry that I was passionate about, I'm still passionate about, which is technology. And so the first company we ended up launching was AlloMatch, an app and website to find pubs and restaurants where you can watch sports. And now we're working on a different company, it's Theodo, but we still do the same job. Fundamentally, we still build apps, but we do it for clients. And 2 examples of the kind of applications we can build. We built, for example, the platform for BPI, the French government bank, to deploy 100 billion euros during COVID under the form of guaranteed state loans. So we were behind the platform that we had to release in 5 days to make sure that all the companies in France had access to financing during lockdown. Another example, in the energy sector, we work for a large energy company, and we've built for them machine learning algorithms to predict drilling accidents on offshore oil platforms. Of course, the idea is to prevent these accidents and save a lot of money in maintenance and actually potentially save lives. And at the beginning, everything was going really well. So we recruited, so doing the timeline fairly quickly. We grow, it's really nice. We started doing sizable revenue. We were quite young, so we were very happy about that. But soon problems start to accumulate. We start having negative feedbacks from clients, and we can see that more and more clients are unhappy. We start losing money on certain projects, and also very frustrating and draining for us is that all the problems are managed directly by Benoit and I. And we start asking for advice, and the advice we're given is the only way to avoid employee mistakes is processes. So basically implementing more processes to train, guide, and control, create a management structure around that to supervise these processes. But actually, when you think about it, that was basically, creating a bureaucracy. And for us, that was going back to square one, and that was not acceptable. So we had a bit of a strong reckoning at the time. But luckily for me, this is around the time that I attended my first Agile Open. So this was a 3-day long conference in the middle of Alsace. It was all the pioneers of Agile in France. And so these are 2 pictures of the event, which show you a bit, where it is, what it looks like. And these pioneers of Agile really convinced us to implement Agile by the book. So we implemented Scrum by the book, and we mixed it together with extreme programming, DevOps, Lean Startup, and ended up with a product which was the Theodo Sprint, which worked incredibly well in terms of really improving delivery. So I won't spend too much time on the benefits of Agile in this conference, but it was really incredible in terms of scaling the delivery side of the company, because we had all these small teams that were incredibly autonomous, that were working directly with the client because the client was part of the team, and that allowed us to scale very quickly on the delivery side. But we also soon realized that Agile was not the model that we could use to transform the rest of the organization, and trying to implement Scrum IDs or directly on at larger scale or in teams that were not software engineering felt incredibly bureaucratic. And it's quite interesting because the time I'm speaking about 2012, and now Agile at scale has become a very trendy topic. But at the time, we really quickly decided that Agile at scale didn't make any sense. So we were quite lost because we really loved the way Agile had transformed our software delivery, and we were looking for a similar kind of inspiring answer to not being bureaucratic at scale, but for the rest of the company. So I end up back at the Agile Open, wondering how to scale in a non-bureaucratic way. And I was particularly intrigued when I met Antoine Contal. So Antoine Contal is this guy. This is a bit of a montage, but so Antoine Contal is the kind of guy that shows up at an Agile Open with a suit. And so that is already very suspicious. And the second thing that was incredibly suspicious is he said, I used to be Agile, and he was indeed a pioneer of Agile. But I've tried to implement it in a large company. At the time, it was Orange, and it didn't work. But I found a better way. And I was like, okay, this guy is either completely bonkers or exactly the guy I'm looking for at the moment. Well, it turned out he was both. And what he taught us at the time was what you're looking for is lean and TPS. And so, but that's, so we started looking into it, especially the TPS part. And what we found on the internet was these like weird boxes with Japanese characters, designed apparently by this like very serious looking man. And even when you translated that to English, it didn't feel like very relevant for our digital environment. I'm just going to give you two examples, but for example, we talk a lot in TPS about safety, and safety, of course, makes incredible sense when you're working in an environment where you've got these like pieces of metal, 1 or 2 tons, swirling around. But when you think about our digital environments, you don't really see these safety issues as clearly. Or another example is inventory management. Inventory is waste. It takes a lot of space. It's bad. But how does it translate to our digital environment where actually there's very little physical products lying around? Anyway, so I don't think we clearly understood the value of TPS at the time, but we were really convinced by Antoine's help. And with Antoine and with OPRA, we were able to start to implement lean IDs, including problem solving, A3s, visual management, which had tremendous impact on the company. They were incredibly valuable and really gave us this answer that we were looking for, which was a framework to help us scale in a non-bureaucratic way, in the least bureaucratic way possible. Not a silver bullet, but clearly a framework that could help us scale. So that was enough lean to be invited to speak about lean. So that's Benoit actually speaking at the European Lean Digital Summit in 2014. And in the audience, you had Michael Ballet. And Michael Ballet said, oh, what you're talking about is nice. I can see how useful it is, but it's not lean because you've not talked about takt time, you've not talked about Kanban, Kaizen. Until you actually start tackling TPS seriously, you still have a lot to learn. And since we had so much value working with Antoine doing lean, and we had Michael this global expert in lean telling us there was so much more to learn, we decided to trust him and to put a lot more effort in going further and studying what TPS in digital could look like. So what that meant concretely is we continued working with Antoine and Regis, but we also started having actually sessions with Michael, and we started researching by lean theory, by reading books, and now even contributing to some of these books. And we also started working as a community because we found, so the first actually company we found that was doing lean in digital was Aramis, which had started in parallel with us, I think, with Nicolas Chartier actually contacting Michael. And then we inspired other startups in our ecosystem to start looking at how they could implement lean in their digital environment. So we ended up being a small group of companies that were trying to translate these ideas of TPS in digital. And we started doing a lot of Gembas and cross Gembas, and now the company is structured about around 100 Gembas a year. So I guess the goal of today is to show you some example of what implementing TPS at Theodo looks like in our digital environment. So I'm going to give you 5 examples. The first one is the roof of TPS, complete satisfaction of customers. So we ask our clients every week how they feel about Theodo's work, to identify problems and work on our improvement dimensions. So a year ago, for example, we identified that a common complaint of customers was staffing. So what does it mean concretely? Well, I'm going to give you our staffing indicator at the time. I'm not in the right tab here. And the staffing indicator was completely green. Why is it green? Because it means that all our teams were fully booked, which of course in terms of revenue is a good news. It means we have revenue booked for the next 3 months. But what it meant for clients was that we lacked flexibility. We didn't have any teams available if they wanted to hire more teams. And so a lot of them were complaining because they would say, oh, working with you is good, but we need to double the number of teams, or we need more help on this and that. And we would say, okay, you have to wait 10 weeks for a second team to join. So seeing how much that was a problem in our customer satisfaction, we decided to do what we would probably call value engineering, which is to try thinking about a very different approach to the problem to really address the thing once and for all. And so we experimented with a new idea, which we called Theodo Certified, which is a platform that tests and trains contractors to augment our teams. And the result is that the number of projects waiting for a team was divided by 2 in 6 months. And on top of solving a client problem, we actually created a new source of revenue, and we're now at about a 5 million annual revenue trend, which means that not only have we improved customer satisfaction, but we've actually created a huge growth opportunity here. Second example, just in time, which is very much about inventory in this example. In digital, we try to visualize the production flow usually on some sort of Kanban-like tool, and we put so every rectangle here represents a feature request, phrased as the experience from the user point of view. So typically here it says in French, as a company owner, I can connect my credit request to my accountant, and all these feature requests are then roughly subdivided into steps in the flow. So there's a functional design step, then there's a technical design step, then there's like a coding step, and then there's a functional validation step. Well, what we've realized is when you start thinking of inventory and you try to and what you try to achieve is to now make the inventory very visible. We decide to split all these steps into two columns, the inventory column and the work in progress column, which is very interesting because all of a sudden you can see that first there's a lot of inventory, a lot of feature requests which are in the flow but not being worked on. And you can also immediately identify that there's one step which is a particular bottleneck that probably needs to be problem solved. Third example, Jidoka auto quality. This is a very common examples in our digital world. But to reduce bugs in production, we use linters, and we've been very bullish at Theodo to have more linters. What are linters? Linters are plugins that allow developers to see in real time if they've made a mistake in their code. So typically, you see this code. For those of you who know how to code, it looks good. But a linter will immediately add a squiggly line under last modified date. Why? Because last modified date is defined as a date that can be possibly undefined. And if last modified date is undefined and we are trying to get the time out of it, it's going to create a bug. And we don't want to deploy that in production. So the linter will allow the developer to immediately see the bug he's written and address it before deploying the code. Fourth example, continuous improvement. So on that one, we've introduced 6 Steps Kaizen as a tool for continuous improvement all across the group. So an example of Kaizen on a project for a client in the banking sector, we will first identify an improvement potential. So something, typically in this example, it's a working environment improvement potential. We have, I won't go too much into the details, but we have a team, and some team members have to wait 5 minutes for a service to actually boot on the machine to be able to test it. So we'll start analyzing the process and the step that have an issue. So this is the second step. And then we'll generate one new ID that we want to work on. And then we'll make sure that the team thinks about the consequences of implementing that ID. What are the trade-offs? What are the risks? What are the things we don't really understand? Then documents how they've actually implemented the change. So typically here we can see 2 code changes in 2 different files. And then an evaluation of the results, but also the learnings and some of the consequences that probably need to be addressed, and how this is all going to be shared with the rest of the company if it's worth sharing. Fifth and final example around respect for people. When we think about TPM, it sounds very industry focused, but actually in every company, and at Theodo too, we also have machines that can break down. And the classic examples are the video conferencing systems, especially since COVID hits us. When the video conferencing system doesn't work, it's incredibly painful and a huge source of frustration. Another example is Wi-Fi. What happens if Wi-Fi network is not really working, if the internet's not working? Incredibly frustrating. So to address that, we've actually decided to implement a monthly routine. So at Theodo, for example, Caroline, who's the CEO, will tour the office with someone from the office management team to go through her checklist of things that are supposed to work and make sure that everything works. So this was my presentation of TPS in the digital environments. As a conclusion, I hope I've convinced you that TPS works in any professional context, including digital. What did TPS bring us, which really was a game changer? It gave us a culture, and it's a culture that enables everyone to improve, and that actually makes work more enjoyable as a result, and that makes the company stronger. So it's really what we were looking for, a framework to create a culture that fights against bureaucracy and enables us to get better results without having to sacrifice company culture and working environments. And just to show you like concrete results for us, this is our revenue growth before and after starting the lean implementation. So it's been a huge success for us in terms of revenue growth, and that has actually translated into better engagement from the team. So this is an interesting number we have. In 2021, 86% of Theodos were ready to recommend Theodo to their friends, which was way above the threshold to actually be labeled happy at work. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Fabrice. Really interesting. If I may have the first question, what kind of interest did you get from your 100 Gemba per year? What kind of discovery? What kind of benefits? How did it work?
This is so Gembas are incredible in so many ways. I'm trying to prioritize the best ones. I would say number one, it is an incredible way to create an interaction with people in the company, which is very intense, very interesting for for C-level, for a company top manager, and so really show deep interest for the person. So that's number one. I think it creates a lot of engagement. People love being looked at during these Gembas. Of course, they're also super interesting. There's always like deep learnings coming from the small learnings. They will have learned something about memory management in a Chrome browser, but with my point of view, what I would have seen is a dysfunction between a development team and the infrastructure team, for example, or I would have seen a deep flaw in the training material, for example. So number one, creating this caring interaction with the team. Number two, learning, doing this helicopter between the strategic thinking of being at the top and actually seeing and feeding it from actual problems on the ground. So these are really the two most impressive things. Third, there's the learning, because actually what is, probably the whole point of Kaizen initially, but by looking more at their own work, people learn stuff that they could have learned probably. It basically creates curiosity. Some people are curious naturally and will, go on blogs and on the internet to try to understand things better. But some people won't, and the Kaizen creates this environment where actually that encourages curiosity and makes a lot more people think about their work than usual. I would say that these are really the three main advantages of Kaizen.
Thank you. We've got a question from Taras. Do you use DevOps as a lean practice for continuous delivery and avoid waste?
So for me, DevOps is really the closest we have in the Agile community. It's the thing that is closest to Lean. So I consider DevOps as a practical implementation of Lean in the software lifecycle development, SDLC, software development lifecycle. So we use DevOps, but I guess now with our understanding of Lean concepts, we see DevOps more as a special case. I would say we don't really need DevOps, and I'm talking about Benoit and I. We don't really need DevOps as a framework anymore because Lean includes DevOps and so many more things. So yes, that would be the short answer.
Okay. Another question again about Gemba from Jan. How does your team do Gembas and visual management without having people in the room? Do you have some tips for distributed teams?
That's a hard one. I would say, it's interesting because we're a digital company, we've always been very well organized around our systems, and so in one sense, going remote for us was incredibly easy. And on the other side, I think there was this need to meet again as a team, because when you have this strong lean culture, what you really enjoy is these like moments of, for example, these Kaizen moments where you think all together in a room about a problem and come up with creative solutions. So weirdly enough, I found that we have been coming back to the office way more than many other companies without even enforcing it. So that's not a really good answer to that question. But then so I think lean culture does encourage in-person interactions. Now, that being said, just to finish a bit on that, we've done a lot of Gambas remotely, and it works. You know, especially for us, where the pieces are digital. You know, if you want to look at a piece of code, if you want to look at a code change, or a problem in the testing infrastructure, this is anyway on a screen. And so sharing that screen and meeting all together around that screen is actually not an issue.
Okay, something which was at the beginning a difficulty for Lean in IT is now on the other hand maybe an opportunity, because you can share the Gamba from the screen anywhere with people located where they are. Okay, thank you. A question from Catherine. Who designs the linters, and how do you capitalize on your learnings?
That's a really good question.
And if you could explain what a linter is, please.
Yeah. So the linter is a piece of code that you apply to your code and that acts as a judoka, because it reads your code, identifies some problems that you've actually designed to identify, and warns the developer. So who designs them? Well, that's there's two sources of design. One is there are some already common linters on the internet that you can use as a base. That will tell you some things. And the example I gave you, that's typically a very I'd say that's a common linter that we didn't design ourselves, because we know that in coding it's just this is a linter that just identified a bug. So what is very, very interesting in terms of linters is that sometimes the action of a Kaizen, like the sixth step of a Kaizen, the sixth step of a Kaizen will be to implement the good idea in the linters as a way to share it with the rest of the organization. Why? Because there's an incredible thing of code. Code is a standard in itself. And so improving the standard can be as instantaneous as actually improving the linter. And since the linter is then used across the company or even across the group for some, you will have these learnings shared with everyone at once, which is really incredible.
Thank you very much, Fabrice. I think it's time. Is it?